So this will be the U. Yes.
Okay, so I think we probably ought to make a start, given the clock is now ticking. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the VIP room. So you should all feel dutifully special. Try and make Chrome. There we go. So this is the DTN working group. If you are in the wrong room, now is your chance to creep out quietly. I'm Rick Taylor. First off, as this is an IETF meeting, this meeting is held under the Note Well. You should have all read a Note Well before. If you're not familiar, I recommend you have a look on the internet and read it thoroughly. Without much more ado, I'll move on. A bit of admin first off. Let me try and make this do something sensible. There we go. So we need a note taker. Would anyone like to volunteer to make some notes? There is an Etherpad URL, so you can dynamically take notes and other people can take notes. I know Ed normally takes some notes, but he is speaking. So if somebody else can jump onto Etherpad while Ed is speaking and try and capture any of the comments that are made at the mic or anything like that, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, can somebody please monitor Jabber for us? We need a Jabber scribe. Although we have Meet Echo and Meet Echo is very good, it would be great if somebody is watching the Jabber channel. Any volunteers? Please. Thank you very much. And the other little bits of admin are, obviously, please state your name at the microphone because we have remote attendees. And presenters, there's a pink cross up here, so you are stood in the right place for the audio-visual recording, which all eventually ends up on YouTube, and the remote attendees can also see you. So we have some apologies, which is, as you can tell, it's just me at the table here. Mark Blanchet sends his apologies, and Magnus Westerland is also remote. He can't make it in person, so he's our AD, but I'm sure he can jump in across Meet Echo and tell me where I'm going wrong. So first off, the agenda. We have a reasonably light agenda for this working group meeting. I will briefly run through some of the document status. As some of you know, the other apology is I have a very nasty cough, so occasionally I may splutter. We have 3 key documents that are all in the, let me get this right. They are all currently going through the area reviews. So we have had some reviews from the Gen area, Sec area for the various documents. These, of course, came back with comments, as they always do. And so I will cover some of the status of some of those documents. And 2 of the authors of 2 of those 3 documents are here, and they're going to say a few words about the comments that were raised and how they're being addressed. There may be some open questions for the working group, which we have plenty of time to discuss. And of course, that discussion will be taken to the list as well. I have the feeling they're not too contentious, but I'll come on to that. And Scott said he wanted to say a few words about bundle encapsulation if he had time and some notes. Scott has no slides. If we have time and there's interest, can you do something freeform? That's very kind. And then we have an open mic at the end. So prior to this meeting, the chairs put a call out on the mailing list to say, does anyone have anything interesting they wanted to present? There was a resounding silence, but that doesn't prevent somebody who was too shy or it was too early to put something on the mailing list. If they have something interesting, please bring it to the microphone. We have time to discuss these things. So, okay, does anyone want to bash this agenda? Do you want to add any items? Have we missed something important? Okay, so going through the document status. For those of you who are not entirely up to speed with what we're doing in the working group at the moment, there are 3 critical documents that are the foundation of the DTN protocol stack for the IETF work. One of which is the update to the bundle protocol, BP-BIS. So the status of this is the GenArt review has come in. There were questions over the definition of time, and we are still waiting for the ops area review and the sec area review to come back in. I'll let Scott cover that in a bit more detail. TCP/CL version 4. So the DTN stack is divided between bundle processing agents, which know how to shift bundles around, and the concept of a convergence layer underneath, which actually acts as effectively a link layer to move the bundles between nodes. The first defined protocol for doing this moving is based on TCP, and hence the TCP convergence layer, and this is the version 4. So this is updating the work that was done in the IRTF, now doing it in the IETF, so this will be a standards track document, and again, we're going through the review phase with it. OpsDIR came back and said, it's fine, there's some typos, can you fix? SecDIR came back with a couple of queries about, because we're running over TCP, that means we are using TLS because it makes good sense, and I won't go into all that detail here. There are plenty of people who can tell you why using TLS is a good idea. That raised questions about certificate revocation. So how is certificate handling managed for that TLS connection between peers? And also because DTN can be a DTN subnet effectively, so an administrative area could be running in a controlled environment such as International Space Station, where your traffic isn't traveling across the public internet and you're pretty sure about which devices are connected to the network, mostly because you put them there. The option to say, look, I don't need TLS, I am an embedded device without the power to do TLS, can I not please? Beg your pardon, means there's a flag in the initial handshake in TCP/CL which says, look, I can't do it. Please don't demand that I can. And if you are happy with that, we can proceed. So obviously security ADs came back and said, well, is that a downgrade attack? How can that be exploited? Have you considered this? And Brian Cepos, who's the primary author, has answered these to what he believes is to his satisfaction. We're waiting for comments to come back from the SEC ADs to see if they're happy with that. And Brian says he has a new version of the draft which captures these comments, sorts out the nits, and I believe he is waiting for the GenArt review to return before he actually pushes out another document. And the third document is, so we know how to define a bundle, and we have an example of how to move a bundle. The missing piece is how do we secure this bundle, not only for integrity, but also for encryption. And that's covered by the BPSec document, which again is in the review phase. So it is currently marked as on hold because it has a normative reference to BP-BIS. BP-BIS is waiting because IANA raised some questions about the reuse of registries from the IRTF documents now being taken on by IETF documents, and I will let Scott try and get into a bit more detail about this, although it's quite a hazy area. Otherwise, GenArt came back and said there were some typos and some small nits, not a great problem, and we are waiting for the SEC area review. So BPSec is it's a security document. It has lots of deep security aspects to it, and I have no evidence of this, but I believe the SEC area will take a little bit of time to make sure it's correct. They have done an early review on it before, so we're hoping there's going to be no showstoppers, but I think Ed is going to say a few things about that as well. I beg your pardon. And that pretty much covers me. So next topic is, some of you are aware that we held a virtual interim between Montreal and today. 18th of September to be precise. The purpose of the virtual interim was to make sure that those 3 key documents that really are blocking, they have to be done by the working group to give us a foundation on which to build everything else. So it's critical that these really do get through onto the standards track as fast as possible. So it was a discussion about how do we, the progress of those documents, and we'll go over that again. There was a big debate. For those who aren't aware, BPBIS is an update of a document that was originally worked on in the IRTF, not the IETF. So there is some politics and admin around, although this is Bundle Protocol version 7, and obviously we would like to say use version 7, not the previous version 6, because it is better, TM. Version 6 is owned by a different standards body. So how do we indicate to readers of Bundle Protocol version 6 that they should go and look at version 7? And the conclusion at the virtual interim was that we should work out, the chairs should go away and discuss with the ADs and the IRTF people involved in order to just make this happen. So rather than leaving both documents in existence, try and work out the best way to mark RFC 5050, so Bundle Protocol version 6, as obsolete. If you're starting a new implementation, don't use this, use the new one that's coming. And the other thing that was discussed in the virtual interim was, given we've got these 3 critical documents almost complete, and they're going through the IESG review phase, and they're heading for the RFC editors, what do we do next in this group? So I know over the last couple of meetings, people have said they have ideas. We still have a couple of charter items. And so as part of that virtual interim, we started to draw up a list of some stuff people would like to work on or like to see done. And that was published out on the mailing list, and there was some good feedback and discussion about it. The AD, Magnus, had some concerns, which was that the list was too ambitious and too big, and was there enough energy in the working group to get this done in a reasonable amount of time? So that's the list. I mean, it's quite an ambitious shopping list, and there are some really exciting topics on there. So from my perspective, yes, this would be great to work on these kind of things, but it does depend on, is this doable, and do we have people willing to do it? So, yes, so I'll go back to that slide in a minute, and if we have plenty of time in this session, so if we want to go back to that slide at the end of the open mic spot and discuss that at some length, I'm absolutely happy to do that. So my only other item was, there is a 4th document that's been lingering around. So for historical reasons, it was taking quite a long time to get the fine detail of the TCP convergence layer done to the satisfaction of the working group and of the ISG and the Secretariat, etc. In the meantime, Scott Burley suggested that he had a very minimal, we are avoiding the word simple, but a really simple TCP implementation that might be able to avoid some of the complexities that was holding up the working on the TCP CL draft. And so he wrote that up and submitted it, and it was accepted as a working group document. However, now that TCP CL has left the working group and is now in the ISG pipeline, do we still need to bother to work on a minimal, less capable subset of that functionality, or are we just making work for ourselves? So I'm looking for comments from the room about this. At the mic, yeah, now is good, Scott, at the mic.
Scott Burley, the minimal TCP/CL is a simple and small enough specification that it's not a huge workload whether we do it or not. It's more of I think it's more of an administrative workload than a compositional workload. If the TCPCL specification is making sort of progress that it is, then I certainly am not a great champion of pushing ahead with MTCPCL if it's not needed. So I'm happy to let that fall by the wayside.
Obviously, I will take that question to the list, but I am interested. Just a quick show of hands in the room. How many people have read TCPCL or MTCPCL? Scott, you wrote it. Both of them. No, only one of them. Okay, so only a couple of people. So this might be a better topic for the mailing list. So as I said, we'll come back to proposed new charter items at the end when we've got a bit more of free time. But in the meantime, I think we'll move over to Scott, if you're okay. Apparently the clicker works.
Oh, excellent. Okay. Good afternoon, everybody. Scott Burley. I work at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I'm going to talk about the GenArt review of the BPv7 specification, latest draft. And I also am extremely sick, so there will be occasional interruptions here while I go and lie down. Draft 17 of the specification was reviewed by the GenArt reviewer, Stuart Bryant, and on these slides, it's about 20-some slides, list the points that were raised in his review and the responses. And sort of by, to frame this, Magnus Westerlund, the area director, also read this review, and he had some responses of his own, and it was his feeling that there were some of these points that actually needed to be discussed in the working group, and I will call those out as I go through. The ones that I think are really sort of open to some question. RC 5050, this is sort of a big one, but I think that what happened in on the mailing list since the interim meeting was it was decided that it was not our job to obsolete RFC 5050. So this document does not obsolete RFC 5050. Stuart's question was, it's not clear what the status of this RFC is with regard to RFC 5050. If it modifies the status of 5050, then we need to say so. And in the interest of not pretending that the 5050 doesn't exist at all, I propose to add this sentence to the introduction and the abstract to make that clear. Just to say that, and this is a distillation of what came out on the mailing list, that IETF is advised this document is an update of RC 5050, reflects lessons learned, does not obsolete RC 5050, probably can't. So anyone reading this document should be aware that we believe it's an improvement over RC 5050, but RC 5050 is not obsoleted. If you want to use it, then at least for the time being, of course, you're welcome to.
Hold on, Scott. Magnus is coming in with a question.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, I already did a comment here. I think you have to be a bit careful about using updates in that, because I mean updates in IETF terminology has different meaning than I think what's intended here. I mean, we're basically talking about something which is revised, or I mean, or it's in some sense a replacement, but it's I mean, it is a revision, so I think something else needs to be said there. But then
adaptation, maybe. I think I took update from the text of the email. So this was I think was is lifted from what came out on the mailing list. But I'm happy to change it to something else. And I think adaptation makes sense.
Also, Magnus, sorry, Rick here.
Yeah.
From my understanding of the results of the virtual interim and the poll put onto the mailing list, the consensus of the working group was to recommend to the IRTF that they did obsolete it. So although we can't obsolete it, we would strongly recommend as best we can that they do so. And the IRTF chair at the time, or I can't remember who he was, I think it's Colin
Perkins, yes.
Yeah, Colin Perkins said, "Oh, I'm quite happy to do that." I mean, it was a semi-informal statement, but he said, "I see no problem that if the IETF have gone ahead and worked on something, then we can just mark our documents as you recommend."
Yeah, and in some sense, we actually put in place a process for this case to actually have IETF obsolete IRTF documents in some sense. So, so that process has been created due to the discussion we had before. So saying when we, but yeah, I mean, I know the working group consensus was to not directly obsolete it, but yeah, it's for the future we have to have this process in place where IETF can actually ask IRTF directly by in basis setting obsolete an IRTF document, and then they can agree on it.
My own feeling is that this document is the wrong place to explain all of that. That having a sentence that says that there's a relationship makes a lot of sense, but explaining the whole procedure and I don't think we should do that.
No, that's not intended. What I'm saying is that we worked on the process backside, so to say, of doing that job. So basically, in the future, if you put an IRTF standard track document that says obsolete and IRTF experimental, we now know what to do with it.
Oh, okay,
and
good.
That question will then, in the approval stage, go to the IRTF chair, and if they agree on obsoleting the IRTF document, that's what's going to happen. So,
Magnus, here's
Yeah.
Nick Vivint, the other. So what would happen, because like I understood just right now that you expect that the IRTF is obsoleting this document, right? So they would need to write another RFC that obsolete this RFC, which seems like a little bit an overhead, right? So if you want to have this document obsoleted, you should do it now.
RFC 5050 is the IRTF document.
Understood?
And the consensus of this working group, which is made up of people who worked on that document already in what was the IRTF working group, believe that we want to obsolete the previous document. It's just that it's held by the IRTF, and therefore we don't have the power to do it.
That's not true. We set up this process.
I was unaware of that process. So
Okay.
really the chairs, and you guys need to help the chairs just make that happen. And whatever text has to go in whatever in this document, we can just get put in. Is that correct?
Yeah, but basically what we put in place now is basically if you just re-add the obsolete 5050, that's the effect it would have. But I mean, that's
I need some help with that.
from a process standpoint, that's what's the minimal. However, my interpretation of the consensus call in some sense was that it wasn't clear cut that the obsolescence should occur at the exact moment this gets published as new RFC, which is what will happen if you put in that obsolete, and the IRTF chair with the process of asking RFC agrees on doing it, which
Rick again. That's not my understanding of the consensus that we saw on the mailing list. So I will probably have to go back over. I read a pretty resounding yes, obsolete 5050.
Yeah.
Or do whatever mechanism is required to say stop building new systems on BP6, build it on BP7.
Yeah.
So I think the process would be you just re-add the obsolete. You say in the abstract it is obsolete. Nothing else needs in the text. And then when we process the document, we would actually ask the IRTF chair to confirm that this obsolete is okay. But that happens in background. So.
Okay, so as I understand it, Scott, that last phrase in that new text is not correct.
Well, okay. So
So
We're
it
going back.
does obsolete.
So
RFC
this is
50.
we're going back to phase A instead of phase B. That's fine. Well, so I will revise this to say it does obsolete, which it said 6 months ago. If we do that, does that also obsolete the other RFCs that were supporting RFC 5050? And I'm thinking there specifically of the RFCs for the IANA registries that RFC 5050 references.
No.
In a way, it's actually easier if it does, because then we can go back in and set up new registries for RFC 50 for BPv7 and avoid trying to merge with the existing registries.
No.
Go ahead, Magnus.
So my understanding is, I mean, because it's formally no, you need to be explicit about which RFCs gets obsoleted by this document, and I think what's currently in the IANA section do work without as currently specified, because you have this is 6255, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, which will defines the registry with the updates to the registration rules that this document specifies. So I think we covered, and I don't want to go back on that decision also. That seems to be that from the main list that we have a joint registry between the different versions, which is what's now set up. So with the updates.
So do I understand then that we're saying that we want to change this document to say that it obsoletes RFC 5050, but it does not obsolete RFC 6255 or whatever it is?
Yeah.
And that the merging of the existing registries that support RFC 5050 with the new values that is reflected in this in draft 17 is still goes forward. Is that right?
Yeah, that's my understanding.
Okay.
Same.
Okay.
Yeah. Thanks, Magnus.
Okay, that was easy. CRCs. Stuart remarked that he's surprised that we're using CRCs in this document, especially given the harsh environment. And so what I've done is I've added in 4.1.1 a note saying that if you want more robust protection, then use a bundle integrity block, a block integrity block rather, as defined in BPSec. The expectation being that in some environments CRCs are fine, in some you do need a stronger protection of the blocks. There was Stuart noted that the manifest block, because it's not defined, seems out of place, and so what I've done is I've removed all mention of the manifest block from everywhere in the specification. It's all gone. We can talk about adding it back in as a new RFC later on. Time. We spent a long time and a lot of cycles on the mailing list talking about time. I think the salient point that comes out of this is really, in my view, this is the third sentence in the extract that I've got here from what Stuart said, is that all you need to say is that you need a monotonically increasing time system, and out of software convenience, you chose the latter. So what I've done is I took 4.1.6, which is about DTN time, and just took out almost everything and said a DTN time is an unsigned integer that is the count of seconds since the start of the year 2000 UTC, and it's going to be represented as a CBOR unsigned integer. And how you figure that out is an implementation matter, and we don't even say that it's an implementation matter because it doesn't matter.
So, Scott, Rick Taylor here. Is that shall correct? It shall be represented as a CBOR unsigned integer. Gives me enough wiggle room to make it a double or format it as a string. Surely that should be a must.
Oh, I thought shall and must. I'm probably wrong there. I thought shall and must were the same thing.
I may be full of cold. Sorry. Magnus is back in. I may have
Magnus.
they, I mean, they are the same. So, but I think it's, I mean, I don't think you should use 2119 language there at all. I mean, this protocol uses a particular representation of this value, and that's, I think you just state that this is represented as a CBOR unsigned, because it's not you defining how it's being represented, and you don't need to make that a must shall or whatever. It's not a debate about it. You just declare that it is defined, or saying how it's represented.
Is that a general comment applying to all of the remarks on representation through the document? Because we essentially say this sort of thing for all parts of the bundle, right? Because everything is supposed to be in CBOR format, and what we say is specifically this thing in order to be in CBOR format is in this CBOR format.
Yeah. So I mean, what you're defining is the exact representation here, and
that's right.
I think, yeah, and I think you can. I mean, I've in many cases maybe an unnecessary use of 2119 language in this time, because it's saying if you just declare that this is represented in and implied basically in BPv7, it is represented in this way. But that's,
okay, should we make the same change to every place else where we say how it's represented?
I mean, it's not necessarily, and maybe so. I actually this is a very minor point. I think it's not like people. I mean, having it as a shell is not. I just think it's slightly overuse of it, but that's actually not. I'm a little bit worried about that. This what's written here is not easily decodable for an implementer either. I'm just saying it's UTC on the second since start of the year 2000 on UTC scale, because the time, yet again, we're back to this question about, okay, how the hell is sleep seconds handled? So.
Well, but that's just it. It's not. Then that's exactly what we're saying, is that there are no leap seconds. It's a count of seconds that have elapsed, and there are no leap seconds in there.
Okay, so this is actually now an actual change to the time format, because
it's not a matter of format. It's just that it's a number. It's a count of seconds.
Yeah, but the Unix time wasn't UTC scale.
Well, no, it is. Unix time is a count of seconds since Unix time is a count of seconds since beginning of January 1st, 1970 UTC.
Yeah. So Magnus, Rick here. What we're not doing is recording a date time. We're recording an interval. How many seconds since 1970?
Yeah, and this usually gets into confusion, saying, okay, is sleep seconds, how is sleep on UTC scale?
But what's it?
So that thing compared to TIA, which would be, I mean, there's difference here. UTC then includes sleep seconds, which means that
right. But it's not saying that it's a UTC interval. It's saying that it's a count since a UTC point. So there are no leap seconds involved.
Yeah, then I think you should clarify that back to get it's like, okay, this is as usual with time. It's surprisingly difficult.
I don't know how to make this any clearer than it is. It's
okay.
A count.
Yeah.
Okay. Do you want to continue this discussion on the list, Magnus?
Yeah, I think we probably need to.
Okay. Because I was just having a quick look through the back log of messages about this, and there was a reference to a CBOR draft about timestamping where they appear to have some good text exactly covering this, talking about an interval of seconds since 1970, and they cover the leap second thing, and it might be, I think it was actually a reference from Carsten, it might be a good bit of reference material to agree around, possibly even steal the text in some way.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks, Magnus.
Yeah.
Okay. There are a number of places in I forget which section, where there's a mention of some anticipated extension blocks, and Stuart's comment was that these should be handled through an IANA registry, and these are block numbers 13, 14, and 15, and they shouldn't be in the text until they're standard. So all of those have been removed. Everything that's not defined is removed from the spec. There are some comments on security. Is there a definition of the bundle and bundle protocol? And what I've done there is I've added a note in the security section saying that it's a current research topic. There isn't a, it is a work in progress, and there is an internet draft. We could refer to it here, or just say it's a current research topic, whichever makes sense. Do you have a feeling on that?
Rick, as chair, I wouldn't say current research topic, because we've got a working group document on, and we're not a research organization.
Okay.
We are engineering that solution. So I would say is a work in progress
Okay.
rather than it's a research topic.
Okay. We'll change it to work in progress. And do we want a reference to the internet draft or no?
I think referencing from this an informative, possibly. I'm not sure whether referencing drafts in progress from a document you're trying to get through standards track. I think that will cause more trouble than. I'm looking at Miria for advice here. Magnus has jumped on. Go. You go first.
Yes, so if it's not a normative reference, it's not a problem at all.
Yeah. Okay, so you put it in as an informative reference.
Okay, good.
I'm going to let Magnus hopefully. Oh, he's gone.
Okay. And Stuart's other comment on security was that there's material in the security section that seems to be defining protocol. There's actually a lot of shall language in there. And he points out it'd be better to define that in the body of the text or point to a definition in another document, which is BPSec. So what I've done is remove all the text in the security section that has any of this normative sort of language in it. So the last sentence in security section is talking about the distribution of public keys, which is a current research topic, which is actually a research topic. Yeah. IANA considerations, a lot of this stuff. Namespaces do not seem to be identified. And here I am at sea. I don't know the difference between a namespace and a registry. And I'm hoping somebody can clarify that for me.
Here comes Magnus.
Yeah. So I think what's he really referring is that he thinks it's unclear which particular registry, because I mean, and especially in this case, you have the registries that group together in that general bundle protocol versus bundle protocol. It's actually, well, I guess it's the group now, but I think we just need to be clear on which particular registry.
The names of the registries are called out specifically in that section. Every single.
Yeah, and that was my reaction to it also. And I mean, I commented that on. So I think it's because. So.
Should the word registry be changed to namespace, or does it matter?
No, I think in IANA terms it's called a registry. You are correct with using registries. I don't see you should change that.
Okay.
I
great.
think I mean, I think it was like in some cases the word bundle protocol maybe was missing in some of these cases, so that it wasn't clear that this was the bundle protocol particular registry. So just check that you go to the IANA registry page, check that you have the full registry name identifier, so to say, the string that's actually on the IANA web page for each registry, that's actually written exactly in the draft.
Okay, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And,
go ahead.
No, that's.
This is mostly text from Mark, who wrote the other draft. So I suspect he got it right, but I will double check.
Yeah.
The IANA registry for new allocations ought to be this RFC. So I think Rick, you said this on the mailing list that it should be RFC 2B in a lot of places. Or Magnus said that.
I think it was Magnus. It wasn't me.
Yeah. So
from experience of this sort of thing, you let IANA define it. You don't. Yeah.
Right. So well, it's not a matter of what the numbers are going to be. It's a matter of how you write the name of the reference.
Yeah.
And so I think that the references currently are or in 16 anyway, or 17 were section numbers in the specification. So we can just change it to RFC2B.
Yeah.
Okay.
So.
Yeah. Yes.
Don't know. I mean, in this Redis table, it's quite common to use like what I put in the chat, which is square bracket RFC to be defined as shortened together, so it becomes RFC 2BD and square brackets, and you put that in the reference part of the tables. So, and then during the publication process, I noticed in the RFC editor will change that to the RFC number assigned.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And then the third part of the IANA considerations comments were that how come there are references to RFC 5050? Does this indicate that RFC 50 is expected to remain a current protocol? How do we do that? And I'm here again. I'm uncertain what we do about this. If we're going to have an IANA section that comprises a merger of the original RFC 5050 oriented registries and the new values, then the reference for those things sort of has to be RFC 5050. If we're not, then we can take them away.
So Scott, Rick Taylor again. I'm slightly confused about the context of this. Was the question around the fact that you have tables of new entry suggestions for IANA in the document which have the previous values used by RFC 5050 in them?
That's right.
So from my non-chair opinion, if I was writing that, I would not include values that weren't defined by the document that you're writing. So you say, dear IANA, please add these values and update existing, if required, the following values, and let IANA maintain the registry. You just define the diff effectively.
Okay, so I would like to.
I'm looking at
I would like to
Magnus's
make
face.
sure that Mark agrees with this, because
So
all of
would
this
I.
text is from Mark.
Okay.
But that's in this case, I think you're wrong, Rick.
I'm often wrong.
Because what we're doing here is we are going forward after this RFC becomes published. What the IANA section currently does is saying that yes, these following registries that we have been updated by this RFC. So the registration definition is being the combination of what's in 6255 and the RFC2B. And therefore, in the tables, we actually want to show how the tables is supposed to look by after this update. And that includes reference then for that's going to be both 5050 and the RFC2B. And I think the fact that they were missing in those entries that is used by both BP6 and 7 didn't have the double reference, etc. It might be part of the confusion here from. So when you're showing that this is how the table will look at the point of registering this new update to the registries. And going forward, of course, you can add to it individual with just saying, as you say, Rick, adds the following entry in the table. And that's going to be handled by IANA. But at this point, we're actually defining a snapshot of a reorganization of the table.
Okay.
Okay. So the current structure is the correct structure.
Don't look at me because I'm wrong. I think
Yeah.
that's what Magnus is saying.
The current structure that's in the document is the correct structure. Okay, good.
Yeah, you just need to add when you have 50/50, and in cases like those base like if you take the bundle format registry or saying which different, I mean, there you just need to have those entries to say, oh, this is both a BP6 and 7, and have both RFCs included, or the RFC2B and the 50/50 for the so that's my opinion at least. So
Yeah. So this is the types are redefined in this document, right?
The definitions are repeated in this document. Yeah.
I would like just add
no, they actually they are defined for BP7 in this document.
Well, no, the the registries in the IANA section are they show the union of the original RFC 5050 values and the new BPv7 values.
And the definition of the original values is now in both documents.
There are definitions. The definitions of some of these values are in 5050, and the definitions of others are in this document.
Ah, okay. So and they're not like anything that's in 5050 is not repeated in this document.
No, they are repeated.
Okay.
Yeah, they're repeated in these registry snapshots.
No, I mean the definition, the actual text.
The
that we have.
definitions are not.
Okay, then it's fine. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So we'll leave that alone.
Okay.
Bundle processing control flags. Stuart said that these are critical enough that there should be a more demanding criterion for updating them, such as standards action. So I said fine. So I changed the registration policy request as shown here. The registration policy is changed to standards action, and because there's a limited number of bits available, it should only be granted for standards track RFC approved by IESG. This is an existing registry. Stuart says, how come there are no private use or experimental allocations? And I don't know what we should do about this. Should we define some that are not currently defined? The original registry did not have any private use or experimental allocations.
Rick Taylor here. I'm actually just looking at the registry. Values 21 to 63 are marked as unassigned. So you could redefine
from
Yeah.
private and
yes. So
and
you
experimental.
could redefine an area of that.
You could.
Personally, not personally. I think it's worth having a few.
Okay.
That's not my chair opinion. That's my personal opinion. Because people do experiments, and let's not get them rampaging across other people's space. I have 4, 5. Don't go mad.
Okay. So
it's just a gut feeling.
some handful, 8 maybe, something.
Yeah, 8 seems a nice power of 2.
Okay. Good. Can do that.
And following on from that, I'd make them right at the top.
Yes. Yeah, at the
it
end.
seems logical to have those, top end of the spectrum. This is a free-for-all area.
Sure. Okay, normative references. This was just a misunderstanding on Stuart's part that he thought BPSec meant RFC 6257, and it actually does not. It means the BPSec specification, which is soon to be an RFC. So it should not be down-refed. Let's see, a normative reference to an IEEE paper on CRC 32. That reference has been changed. It now refers to RFC 3385 instead of the IEEE reference defining CRC 32C. There's a reference to the definition of epoch time, and Stuart said, I'm not sure it's a good idea, and it becomes moot because everything relating to definition of time has been removed. So that handily moots this question. There's CDDL at the end of the document. What's the license position for that? And I'm quoting from Magnus's email here that it's not code, it's format description comparable to ABNF. I don't propose to change anything there. And then there was more on namespaces. There are several places where Stuart asked, where's the namespace? What's the namespace? And we've been through this just a few minutes ago, so I think the resolution here is it's fine the way it is. I'll go back and make sure that the registry names are correct, that match up exactly with what's on IANA, but that we don't need to be saying what the namespaces are because the registry names are essentially the namespaces. There's a URI scheme types registry, and Stuart's reservation here is that it's an 8-bit field. Why are there not more reserved values that require more considered action to release? And that's a good question. So I don't know what to do about that. And I open the question up to the working group. What do we think about this?
I'm just trying to find the...
Oops, let me go back. There we go.
Sorry, I'm just trying to find the reference
Yeah.
myself on my laptop.
Yeah, URI scheme types.
So is that that's in the bundle protocol?
It's a bundle protocol URI scheme types, I think is the name. Yeah, I didn't copy the whole name into the header here.
I'm struggling to find it.
Yeah, I'm not certain just what the name is. It could be scheme type codes, or, but it's URI scheme. The bundle protocol URI scheme should, if you search for that, it should come up.
Are you talking about under the actual IANA URI schemes?
Yeah, I think there are the schemes, but there's the thing is that the schemes are definitions of URI schemes, but what we're defining here is codes that are numbers that identify those schemes, and that's a new registry.
That's why I can't find it's new. Go ahead, Magnus.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we're talking about is section 10.6 in the, at least the submitted version.
Right.
That registry, and it has 0 is reserved, 1 is DTN, 2 is IPN, and 3 to 254 is unassigned, and 255 is reserved. So that's, and I don't think this is an issue, and its specification requirement seems very reasonable for this. You need to have a URI scheme definition, which you want to add to this protocol, and that's, I think, is sufficient to have some documentation of how you use this in BP7.
Do we need a larger number of reserve values?
Rick speaking personally, now I've worked out what on earth we're talking about. Sorry for being slow. No, I don't think so. It's me speaking personally, not as chair. I don't particularly like this 8-bit field anyway, but I know the reality is IPN exists and the DTN text-based schema exists as well. So we need to have a selector.
Yeah.
And
there could conceivably be others, and that was the intent, is that it's a URI, so you can have like lots of different ways of doing it.
Exactly, and then having this sort of numeric selector in there seems to go against the grain of what the URI guys are trying to do. So I think philosophically it's not a great idea. So making it bigger than 8 is just inviting people to,
I agree, yeah,
to go off and do more crazy numeric stuff, which is probably not right.
Right. Well, there's only one reserved value in that 8-bit field. Is that sufficient?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good.
I mean, I think at least it is, because I mean, what's like 255 would be used if we ever run out of space at this table. You would use 255 to say, oh, by the way, you need to go look at something else here to understand this.
Okay.
And I don't think this never will occur in this, because
Go ahead.
registering so many different URI schemes for bundle protocol doesn't seem that likely.
Mm-hmm.
To start here. So I used to see a lot of RFCs with, reserved for future standards action, and point taken that we may not be fond of the existence of this field in the first place, but we'd be even less fond if people start using it and filling vast regions of the 8-bit space with different things. So it might not be unreasonable to reserve half the space for standards action and only leave half the space open for people to do whatever crazy things they're thinking of doing.
Rick here, point taken. I thought the idea was to reserve that the whole 8-bit field is under standards track control. So you have to have a standards track document to get one of those values. So,
but it's specification required, and I mean, basically, this is URI schemes. You need to have a URI scheme to begin with,
Right.
and then you need to have a need to use that URI scheme in bundle protocol, and then you need a document that defines how you do that, and that's
Right.
I think a very reasonable bar, and it's basically for an expert to also check that is this a reasonable request to add it. I think you don't need to put the bar that high and split this. I mean, I wouldn't expect an issue with this.
No.
So.
Okay. So we'll leave that alone. Good. There's a reference to the DTN Research Group website in the for additional information section. He thought that was a bad idea, so I've removed that reference. And he objected to the word contraindicated, which is actually goes back to RFC 5050. But as he points out, some of us may be less familiar with this word than others.
So can I jump in as Rick here? I had a similar instance in a previous RFC I got published where, and this sort of stuff is picked up by the RFC editors. I had a statement talking about magic beans, and the RFC editors are very good copy editors, and they understand about the use of English for non-native English speakers and understanding that this is legible and clear. From my perspective, these topics are to be picked up by the RFC editor, and they will quiz you about this and other things you didn't realize.
Okay, they didn't pick it up for RFC 5050.
Well, perhaps we'll get a different editor this time, or I'm not sure it's worth spending time working on the English language at this point. It's a perfectly valid word.
I'm fine with that. I've proposed to stick in 4 words here.
Well,
as a definition, but we don't have to.
We have an opportunity here. We have a room full of, I imagine, some non-native English speakers. Does anyone who English is their second language have an opinion about the word contraindicated?
So it's being one of them. Yes, I think it's fairly far out in my vocabulary. At least it's not obvious. Not one word which is like immediately springs to mind of what it means. So if you can change it to something simpler, I think there is a point in it.
Okay, so I would propose then to just leave it for the copy editors and not deal with it now. And I think that's the last of my slides. Is that right? Yes. I think that's all.
Fancy. Thank you, Scott. Any questions?
Thanks.
Okay. Goodbye, Magnus. So next up we have Ed, who's going to be talking about what's happened in the wonderful world of BPSec. The clicker does work, allegedly.
Oh, good. And I'm on the X. So, hello, my name is Ed Barain.
You may need to be close to the microphone. It's not great.
And I work at Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, and I wanted to just go over some updates to BPSec. So the version of BPSec that went in for review was BPSec version 12. We made some responses to those reviews, which was BPSec version 13. None of the changes or comments were significant, certainly nothing that changed the processing or the data structures associated with the protocol. So to use up a little extra time while we have the working group together, I wanted to also talk about some of the interoperability work that we are doing and some policy rules associated with, to see if the working group had any comments on those before the internet drafts associated with them would come up on the list. So for BPSec 12, the general review came back with ready with nits. There were some very, very minor comments associated with making sure that we had spelled out acronyms before they were used, or there was an extra space in between 2 words. And we fixed all of those without any fuss. We did not get sector review comments back. I believe that they were initially requested to be due about a week ago on November 14th, but we don't have an update on that. So if anyone does have an update on that, or if there's a way that we could appropriately ask for an update, that would be appreciated. Otherwise, the only other reviews that came in, the IANA reviews were not significant, and it talked about the question of how do we look at the registries from the point of view of BPBIS and RFC 5050, and I think that we came to an understanding there. In particular, the IANA updates most recently were that we converged on these registry questions. The new bundle protocol specification, BPBIS, will register BPv7 block types, and we will not have conflict with those block types in RFC 5050. The BPSec document had called out block types 2 and 3 for the integrity block and the confidentiality block. We won't do that because RFC 5050 block type registries in V6 had already defined 2 and 3, and we don't want that kind of collision. So these will be moved most likely to 11 and 12 instead of 2 and 3. It really doesn't make a difference from our point of view. It's still all encodes within 1 byte, so it would have really practically no impact on BPSec or the size of the blocks. And in BPSec version 13, I updated those to be 11 and 12. I will probably have to publish a 14, which I'm going to wait on for sector review, when I won't even put 11 and 12. And I think the right thing to do is to say, as assigned by IANA or whatever the appropriate text is.
Yeah, and Rick here, unless there's some compelling reason why the values 11 and 12 have meaning, then just ask for some numbers.
Indeed, and really, as long as it's less than, I think, 22 or so, which is what you can pack into a CBOR byte without going into 2 bytes, that would be our preference. So, but to respond to the comments that we've gotten to date, we put out a BPSec 13. We made all of the minor changes. We corrected the GenArt nits. And we cleaned up some other terminology. In particular, there was some leftover terminology that talked about key parameters as opposed to just parameters. And there really isn't a sense of parameters and key parameters. They are all just parameters. So we cleaned that language up. Actually, walking through the description, the text-based description of example blocks in an example bundle, the text did not match the figure. Which was surprising when I went through and did a final read-through. So we made a few minor corrections to make sure that the text matched the figure. The figure was correct. And then really, because we had made a terminology change from Cipher Suite to security context, we made sure that we had used the proper terminology, security context, everywhere that was needed in the document. So these were all clean up things, nothing that changed the standard, the data structures, or its processing. So what is left? Once we get the security reviews back, we will apply any comments that we get. We did get an initial review of BPSec version 6, even though that was 7 versions ago. There really has not been significant technical change to the document. It has been mostly clarifying text, some of which was responding to the comments that we got from BPSec 6 sector review. So I think that we're good there. We're not expecting any significant problems or changes or showstoppers coming back. And we do have the same reviewer as the person who reviewed this 7 versions ago. So I think we'll be okay. We'll update the IANA section as we need to. We will make sure, the only other thing that has come up is the BPSec document makes a reference to something called EID reference. As we use it in the document, it just means the reference to the security source EID. However, someone noted that in BPv6 terminology, EID reference has a specific meaning, which is a pointer into a dictionary in a primary block in BP version 6. And so that is something we should not use. We should just say EID instead of EID reference. So we'll clean that up in the next version to make sure that there is no terminology collision. And otherwise, any review comments will apply as we get them. So unless there are any other specific questions or concerns around BPSec as a standard in review or recommended standard in review, I wanted to move on and talk about a few other things.
Yep.
Right. So we introduced the concept of a security context separate from a Cipher Suite because a cipher suite is a suite of tools that you would use to apply different security constructs into the bundle to generate results, to generate ciphertext from plain text. However, a cipher suite assumes a set of configurations. And one of the things that we would typically see, such as in IPsec, is a security association. A security association would be some predefined or pre-configured set of configurations that could be shared end-to-end. That's not necessarily one-to-one a reasonable thing to expect in a delay-tolerant network. However, the concept that there is a security context around a cipher suite, which is the cipher suite plus the configuration or understanding of configuration associated with how to use and apply that cipher suite, is a useful concept. And if we just use the term cipher suite, it doesn't imply cipher suite plus that additional contextual information. So to make sure that there was not a confusion of those terms, we decided not to say cipher suite, we decided to say security context. In that, to then give an example of how this would be used, we define some interoperability security contexts. And there is one called interop-sc-00, which is a working group document and presumably would go forward once we make sure there are no changes in BPSec. And we have then started looking past the initial draft security context into what other ones might be useful to have. And so here are three examples of current thinking on security context concepts that are out there. I wanted to put them in front of the working group to see if there were any comments. The first is there value either in the existing interoperability security context or in a new one to add a self-signing bib? And for those of you who are familiar with the context of a bib is a security block that is added to a bundle, and the block type specific data in the bib has, among other things, a result, a signed integrity signature over the target block that it is targeting. And is there a value in having a separate signature result in the bib that is a self-signature over itself, to see if anything had changed in the bib?
Yeah, I can think about that.
And one of the reasons that had come, so there is not a draft associated with any of these three things. And one of the items that we will propose is another internet draft will show up that has either 3 internet drafts or one that has multiple security contexts in it, which will have some of these ideas. And so perhaps at the next IETF, if there is time, we could present it as a draft. But just to prime that discussion, we wanted to bring forth some of the ideas here to see if there was a strong sense or useful comments that we could get prior to writing such an internet draft.
So Scott Burley, just asking about this and really asking, I don't know enough to comment, but would the self-signature on the bib be, would it be obviated by using asymmetric encryption?
Yeah.
Or would you need it even if you have public and private keys?
So it could be, but again, if this were a security context, if the security context has a superset of the cipher suites used, it would say if you are using a security context, the security context would say, here are the cipher suites that we would be using, and we would use these particular cipher suites to generate target signatures and self-signatures and handle them in this way. If you then were to change, if you were to use a different cipher suite with a different context, it would be a different security context, not this one. So a concept around the security context is it is the cipher suites that you would use and the context around it. It isn't, we could keep the same security context and swap cipher suites in and out under the hood.
It's just the parameter. Yeah.
Scott Burley again. So that I think that wasn't exactly my question. I think you asked, would it be valuable to have a self-signing bib? And my question was, do you need it? Do you need self-signature on a bib if the cipher suite that you happen to be using is based on asymmetric encryption?
So
Or do you only need self-signature on a bib if you've got symmetric keys?
I don't. So I don't fully understand that question because if you have multiple parameters in the security block itself, do you want an integrity signature over those parameters? Or if you look down to one of the questions that we have for bib a little bit, a couple bullet points down, would you also want to include things like the block processing flags of the bib in the integrity signature? And I think that deciding whether you want to protect changes to the bib block itself is different from whether you're using symmetric or asymmetric key to generate some of the contents of the bib block. So I don't know that I'm understanding that question. So if I create a security bib, it will have security results in it, but it will have a lot of other material in it, and I don't want an attacker, for example, to twiddle some bits in the bib in a parameter field or somewhere else that never touched a cipher suite, symmetric key or asymmetric key.
Okay, so sorry, Rick, just jumping into the queue here, just because I can't be bothered to stand up. If I understand what you're saying is, given now security context is more than just the cipher suite selection, there is also extra metadata that is carried in that context. You could use a cipher suite that's self-protecting in some way, public-private key pair, but that other metadata isn't covered under that protection, and therefore your question is, what if you could put a bib on that, and then you've got an endless recursive loop of self-signing each other?
So you probably wouldn't want an endless recursive loop.
Yeah.
But if you look at the contents of a bib would say, this is the security context identifier that I'm using. Then these are the parameters for that security context. And then here's a set of key value pairs of results. Result type 1 has result value. And yes, that value would have been generated by whatever cipher suite was used. But if I'm a malicious person, I'm not, but if I were a malicious person, I would come back and say, if I see a bib, I could change the security context ID from a 7 to an 8. And that would result in failure perhaps to verify at a security waypoint or a destination because I've changed something about how we would apply a cipher suite. But you might be able to catch that even sooner and say specifically something had happened with the parameters as opposed to the result data, and is there value in that? Or if someone were to change the block processing flags of a bib, would you want to understand that and then react to that as well, as opposed to ignoring it? And that's the kind of extra data around the cipher suite results. And the question is there value in signing that?
Rick again, I would solve that problem by using bundle-in-bundle encapsulation.
Okay.
I would just, at that point, it gets so meta in terms that I would take a step back and say, just encapsulate the whole bundle and then I can guarantee integrity of it.
I guess I guess in my mind, the endless recursive loop that you're talking about is the issue, and maybe incorrectly, but why would the self signature itself not be susceptible to being fiddled with, so that it no longer works? There's probably a reason for that, but I don't know what it is.
Well, no, it's
And is the impact any different if whether you? I take your point that earlier in the path of transit of that bundle, an intermediate node may say, "Hey, the integrity signatures have been tampered with." Drop. Is that? I suppose the point is that you could do that check earlier in the path, or could you not? I suppose with the security context where an intermediate node could not work out whether tamper has occurred. I'm trying to work through the use case.
No, well, so quite simply, there is data in a bib that is not integrity signed.
Right.
So there are 3 ways that you could handle that. One is to allow data in a bib to just never be integrity signed. The second is take the entire bundle and encapsulate it in a different bundle, and then integrity sign the entire bundle,
yeah,
which is a little heavyweight.
Yeah.
The third is to say, of the data that is not integrity protected in the bib, add an integrity signature to it, which does not force you into infinite recursion. It simply says you can construct an integrity signature over the data that is not signed and carry that signature.
I'm going to draw the line
Okay,
on
So-
this
so-
one, because
so
let's
you-
take this to the list. This is really interesting, but I think we all need to have a long think about it.
So absolutely, and point being is that I wanted to just
Yeah.
get some of those ideas out.
Okay, so I think there's interest in taking this to the list.
Sure, sure. And it just in the
No, keep
in
going with
brief
the other
time,
points. We got a little bit more time.
The other is a single target, multiple result. Something else that came back was it would be nice to have a security context that would say, here's a cipher suite. You don't need to necessarily have a single signature with a single key over the target data. What we could do is provide multiple parameters for the security context, and you would generate multiple results. And the security context documentation would then come back and say, if any of these verify, then the block has verified and it would be okay, or if some quorum of them verify. And that might be a way of saying, if I don't know all of the recipients and I don't have a single multicast EID key, then I can carry multiple signatures. And we think that that's a reasonable thing to do. As opposed to having multiple bid blocks or multiple individual entries, you could capture it in a single security context, and that would be a little less bites on the wire.
Rick, again, I can see some, as far as I've understood it, I think I can see some value in that to handle the case of expired certificates. So you could multi-sign with out-of-date information that at least the person at the other end knows they can unpack it and know it's out of date, because one of the targets validated the integrity, but they knew they were using an old key or something like
Yeah,
that.
no,
Yeah.
that's a great idea, particularly if you have key rotation schedules or something else. You can go over
It's a
period.
GTN. You could be away for for longer than you were expected, and all your certificates expired while you were away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that is good, and that's good feedback. I'll pick it from the notes. And then the last was for even just the interoperability security context that we have. Right now, the integrity block only captures integrity over the data portion of its target. So if it's looking at target block B1, it will look at B1's block type specific data fields and generate a signature over that. However, there's an entire block header separate from the data. There's no reason why you could not take the entire block or large pieces of the block, canonicalize it, and generate the integrity signature over more than just the block type data fields. And there are three things at least that could be done there. One is we could leave it as is and only generate the integrity signature over the block type specific data. The other is generate a signal signature over the entire extension block, or at least a superset of just the block type specific data, which could be done. Or the third is you generate two signatures, which seems like a lot of work, one over the block type specific data and one separately over the block extension data, and then have rules as to whether both are required or one is a nice to have in case someone changes a block processing flag. I didn't know if there were any opinions about that.
I need to think about it.
And then the last one is the same question reimagined for a confidentiality block, which is, again, the BCB will replace the block type specific data of its target with ciphertext, and it will generate a signature over that ciphertext. Is there then value in having a separate plain text signature over the non-block type specific data fields of its target? The block type ID, the block number, the block processing flags, things like that.
And that information is pretty canonical, isn't it? I'd say, sorry, Rick Taylor here. I'm going to have to think about this. I'm going to have to think about the representation, because I think this comes down to, do we have a canonical representation of these things that can be validated correctly?
And I believe BPBiz has a canonicalization algorithm for extension blocks that this could be used. I believe that's the case.
Okay.
I no longer believe that is the case. But one could, however, a security context, and this is something that the BPSec document describes, a security context is able to define a canonicalization algorithm to be used if one does not
It's
exist.
one of those methods.
So those were some ideas as we will start putting forward some security context internet drafts to describe this idea of not just cipher suites, but cipher suites and behavior and context configuration associated with them.
Scott Burley, actually thinking about it, the canonicalization, we do have specification in BPBIS for serializing a extension block. And so the serialized representation, the CBOR, serialized representation of extension block, I think you could think of as being the canonicalization of that extension block. And so in that sense, we do have it.
As long as, is there some normative way of saying, well, here are some unused or reserved bits in the block type processing flags, and set them all to 0 or set them all to 1 or truncate them in some way?
So Rick, we've been round this before, and I believe that there was a working group working on CBOR signatures and certificate and key material who worked through all the canonicalization of CBOR serialization rules, but I will need to look through my notes and try and remember what on earth I'm talking about.
Well, no, that would be a good reference to have, because
Yeah.
I think we're going to come up with that as we define the behaviors of various security contexts.
I'm thinking that work's been done already for us and we don't need to reinvent it.
Like that. So those were some security context ideas. Then the last topic, and if we're stretching on time,
we're fine for that.
so the next is the BPSec document defines how security blocks can be added into a bundle to implement security services. However, there's a separate out-of-band question, which is, if I am a waypoint node or if I'm a destination node, how do I understand whether a service needs to be in the bundle or not? And there's a problem with encoding that information in a bundle, because if you go through a malicious node, the malicious node could remove that information or put other information in. An example of that would be if a source of a bundle adds a BIB into a bundle and it goes through a malicious node, the malicious node could drop the BIB signature, change the target block. If the destination doesn't know that a bib should have been there, it would not think to check the integrity of the target block and would pick it up and use it. And so something has to exist at destinations that say this is what you are expected to have in a bundle. And when you generate bundles, this is what you should put in based on those specifications.
Mm-hmm.
And that's an out-of-band mechanism, and it's covered in the BPSec security consideration document and policy, security consideration section and policy consideration section. We've started looking through what that could look like. It is largely informed by the ION implementation, which has thought through some of this in what they call the ION SecAdmin tool and the processing rules, the security processing rules. In looking at this, we've defined 3 different roles that a BPA, bundle protocol agent, may have. A bundle protocol agent could, in some cases, act as a security source, which is an agent that adds security blocks into a bundle, either a bundle it is creating or a bundle that it is modifying before retransmitting or forwarding. A security waypoint, which is cases where a bundle agent would verify a security service like integrity before forwarding a bundle. And the last is when the bundle agent is itself the destination of a security service, perhaps a node that would do decryption, which may or may not be the same as the bundle destination itself. And those are, a single node could be each of those for different bundles that it encounters.
So, Rick, just jumping ahead of Scott, I have a question about your security waypoints, and I understand this. Are you attempting to tackle the problem of malicious intermediate nodes moving corrupted bundles around the checker waypoint?
No. So
we're not trying to do path-based security here.
No. So I understand the use of the term source, waypoint, and destination, and the connotation of those terms with routing. And there is no expectation that there is any routing or path computation expectation with that. When we say security source, security waypoint, and security destination, we mean literally the source, the EID that is the source of a security block, the EID that is processing a security block that is not the destination, the end receiver of that. And a security destination is not the bundle destination and is not a part of a path and a route. A security destination is a BPA that say, I am the end consumer of that security block. I will process it remove it from the bundle, and then separately perhaps deliver that bundle or forward it on to someone else.
Okay.
Scott Burley, I'm security destination. Of course, I immediately raises a flag for me. You're saying that it has nothing to do with routing. How do you ensure that the block reaches its destination if you don't route using it?
So when we looked at the original BSP, there was a concept of security destination, which was itself somehow conflated with routing, such that you needed to get to the security destination before you got to the bundle destination.
Well,
and they could be the same thing.
You needed to get to the security destination. Yeah, I guess before it got to the bundle destination, because otherwise you would never get to it. Sure.
Yeah. So that was certainly a problem, and was one of the things. It was one of the reasons why we looked at BPSec separate from BSP, because it was one of the implementation concerns.
Right.
There is no expectation associated with routing. When you add a security service into a bundle, for example, if you say, I am going to encrypt a target block, there is not necessarily anything in that block that says only some future other block or other node in the network can decrypt this. You encrypt the block and you send it along its way. Who decrypts it later is a function of this kind of policy implementation that is out of band with BPSec. If you are the bundle destination and you receive an encrypted block, you will try and decrypt it. You may not succeed. You may not have the security context. You may not have the cryptographic material to do the decryption. And you may wind up at the bundle destination receiving an encrypted block that you don't know how to process. Now but that is a network configuration error, not an issue per se with the security specification.
I would suggest that it'd be nice to find a term other than destination then, because destination connotes intent. It connotes direction to a point, as opposed to here it is. Whoever it is that receives it and can do something with it, please do something with it.
Could I suggest something like origin and target? I mean, it's not really target either, is it? But
it's my first thought was producer and consumer, but I don't think that's exactly right either.
We're talking about roles, not moving things. I agree with you. Again, no, we have a little bit of. You've got about 3 more minutes.
But point being, I agree, and I'm open to other terms. The insight into this is the originator of the bundle does not determine who the destination is. It is incumbent upon the receiver of the bundle to self-identify as the destination. And from that perspective, there is not intent from the sender side. It is a self-identification on the receiver side.
And my concern is that someone coming to look at this specification doesn't know all the context and history, might be confused.
Sure.
And I think it would be good to avert that confusion.
So I'm not tied to the term in particular. If there's a better term, perhaps consumer,
okay,
that would be better.
Something, yeah, okay.
Stu Card here, 3 quick ones. Starting with the last first. A word that seems somewhat cumbersome, but that might have the correct definition would be acceptor, security acceptor.
I can see that. Sure.
Then second question, security source, second bullet item, last word, may or may not be the bundle destination, setting aside the...
I'm sorry, that's a typo. It may or may not be the bundle source.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you. And lastly, security waypoint, responsible for optionally verifying security services. Is that the only thing that a waypoint can do, or could a waypoint, for instance, do proxy re-encryption?
So as we have laid out the roles, we would say that verification but not changing would be the role of the waypoint, and that if you were to re-encrypt to me means decrypt from an existing and then re-encrypt with a different security context, in which case that node would no longer be a waypoint, it would be both a security acceptor and a security source. that's separate from the idea of super encryption, which would be you take the initial ciphertext and generate ciphertext over the ciphertext, which we currently don't believe is a useful thing to do in BPSec.
All fine, but one clarification, proxy re-encryption doesn't necessarily involve going from ciphertext to plain text and then back to ciphertext. There are tricky re-encryption.
I think, Rick here, I think the point is that the waypoint has read-only access to the bundle. I would again suggest waypoint is probably not the right word, and verifier or something like that. Someone who examines the bundle, checks it is all okay, but doesn't touch the security context involved.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah.
Fair enough. No, I appreciate that. So then
Whoa.
we can skip over that unless anyone wants to test their eyesight, but it is just sort of some of the illustrations, which we can now do in SVG
Yeah.
to the internet drafts. When we talk about these different roles, and we'll keep security source, what would they look like? And so part of this process is to put together at least the data model or the language associated with how these rules would be specified. And for a security source, there are two pieces to it. One is, how do you identify that a security service is necessary? And then how do you represent which security service that actually is? Borrowing from ION, we've said that the way you identify whether a security service is required in a bundle is to say, if your bundle was sourced at this particular EID with wildcard matching, and it is destined for some other EID with wildcard matching, and you have this type of block in the bundle, then this particular block type going from bundle source to bundle destination should have this security service associated with it. We don't call out in particular integrity versus confidentiality because that's captured in the security context ID. And then the security source would be, which EID do you want to represent this BPA? As we know with BP, a particular physical node can have multiple EIDs registered with it. And so you would perhaps want to configure when you add a security block into the bundle and you want to represent that security source EID in the security block, you have an option of EIDs to choose from. Which one would you want to use? And then if there are any particular security context parameters that you want carried in the security block, they would be listed as well. And a simple example of what that would look like would be if you are generating a bundle coming out of IPN 1.anything going anywhere and you have a payload in it, then you will identify the security source ID as IPN 1.0 and you will use context 7 with some parameters associated with it. And this list of rules would be the security policy associated with the security source. Then if you are either a security verifier or security acceptor, then you would have a slightly different, that rolls off the tongue, thank you. You would have a different set of information. The identification would still be the same. If you are receiving a bundle from this source, bundle source to this bundle destination, and it has this block type in it, then this is what to expect. This rule would say if you match that with wildcards, you should see a security block with security context ID of whatever over that target block. And in addition to the security parameters in that security block, here are some local parameters that you would also want to feed to the cipher suite. And the reason we do that is there are times when you may not wish to put all of the security context parameters in the security block because you understand that there is some pre-configuration or pre-sharing or pre-calculation of information that doesn't need to be in the bundle and can be assumed across. Obviously, if you were in networks or cases where you can't make that assumption, you can find ways of putting that data into the security block itself. And then lastly, based on whether you are a verifier or an acceptor, you would say, what are the processing actions that I might want to take based on how the verification or the acceptance of that security source would go? And this would give you fine-grained control by block type and by security context of how you handle certain behaviors. So what I've started putting together, and this is by no means either correct or complete, is the set of actions that you may want to or into a action bit field. If follow the block processing control flags if you failed something.
Sorry, Ed, can I jump in here? So this bit field, where is it? Is this going in? Is your intention to put another extension block in which contains these rules, which travels with the bundle?
No, not at all. So
So that would be an implementation as part of your rules. That would be a lookup in some sort of data table, and then that's my action.
absolutely.
Okay,
In
gotcha.
fact, if I were to show you this, which is an even worse picture,
Wow.
in
I'm
terms
close.
of, and I have if we would come back and say I am a BPA agent that is receiving a bundle, I would have a local policy database
Yeah.
associated with my source rules, my verifier rules, my acceptor rules. And the verifier rules and the acceptor rules, while they may have the same format, may themselves be different because you may take different actions based on what role you have. But this is something that would be local implementation associated with the BPA. And it would allow you to say things like saying, if the security context failed to verify in some way, then we would set bit 4, which says, please send a report signifying that to the report to EID. And that is ORed with bit 8 that says, and delete the security target that failed the processing. And that's ORed with 10, which is delete the security block associated with that as well, or some such thing. So the point is, I'm not saying these are the correct action points, but the idea is that from a formatting perspective, this is likely the set of information. And then you could see a series of rules or rows in a database that you could walk through saying, I've gotten a bundle in, it's from this source to this destination within wildcards. Like I got a bundle from IPN 1. something, it's going somewhere, it has a payload in it. I should expect that this would have a security block over that payload using ID 7. It may not itself have a key name in it, but I'm going to hard code it that the key name should be 1. And here are the actions I will or will not take based on how the processing goes.
Scott Borelli, I'm just, as I'm listening to this, I'm wondering if this is the moral equivalent of firewalls for DTN?
It is, yeah. This is access control.
Yeah,
Yeah?
perhaps.
Yeah.
Okay, so and a reason to bring that up is that several years ago there was work on a DTN analog to BP IP tables,
BP tables.
BP
right.
tables, and I'm wondering if that needs to be revisited and maybe superseded by this.
Fair enough. Point well taken. And our point was that as we start trying to do reference implementations for BPSec, we need some way of capturing the policy associated with what blocks you put in, what blocks you verify, and what actions you take based on those.
So, Rick, with my chair hat on, yes, I can see there's two parts to this. Yeah, there's a lot of implementation detail here, but I see value in exploring the use cases for that implementation to ensure that we've covered all the corner cases in BPSec and we've got the power to do this sort of thing. So I really like the work. I think it's really clever. But yeah, it's filtering access control list stuff, and it's a good demonstration of what we can do with BPSec. I'm not sure we'd dive too far into sponsoring work about bit layouts for implementations and so on, but I'm not sure you're proposing that.
No, and perhaps the output of this usefully would be something informational.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm looking at the time.
Oh, and that's it.
That's it.
All done.
Okay. Any other questions from people? Nope.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ed. So, Scott, you don't have any slides about bundle and bundle encapsulation. Do you want to do something off the cuff?
Sure, and really all I would want to do is encourage people to take a look at the latest internet draft for bundle encapsulation. I'll probably be posting another one because the window is closed right now, but as soon as the window reopens, I've got another draft ready to post. The reason bundle encapsulation I think is important for a couple of reasons. One is there are some security features that you can get from bundle encapsulation that are difficult to get any other way, such as protection from traffic analysis. Another, though, is that the bundle encapsulation specification includes the custody transfer mechanism that was in RFC 5050, and actually extends and updates that to implement a an aggregate custody signaling system that has been in ION for several years, developed by guys at University of Colorado to bring the overhead of custody transfer down. I think that's a useful mechanism, and it'd be. I think it's an important work item for the REACH-Charter, which is our segue into the next topic. And in my mind, it's my mind is the top priority work item for the charter after we get these three documents in place. Any questions on that? Thanks.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks, Scott. So we have 20 minutes left of the session, and following on from the, is that full screen? Oh, God. Following on from the interim, the list of proposed new charter items, as was circulated on the mailing list, is this. So Magnus at the time raised the concern that this is a very long list, and I know there are drafts. So you can see that those marked with D have an active or recent draft, and those marked with an X have a draft from the IETF DTN research group. So some of this stuff does have some documentation already, but the critical question is, before we update the charter for the working group, so DTN working group phase 2, we need to make sure that the items that go on the charter are achievable. So I'm looking at the people in the room here. Only our AD is on Meet Echo, but I'm assuming or hoping there are a couple of other people on Jabber, and there are other people who are willing to step in and help put some of this together. So this is now an open mic opportunity for people to say, yes, I'm interested in working on some of these things. Yes, I am interested in this new thing, which I think should be really important, etc., etc. Or, no, I think this is nonsense. Help yourself.
So Ed Bahrain, I know that the asynchronous management has a lot of items under it, but I would say that this work will continue. It has some years behind it. It has years ahead of it. And so we would be able and have the energy and people who are already working on it to continue it. And obviously, if anyone else wanted to join in, we would welcome that. And then if we talk about a manifest block or a table of contents block or something else that provides expectations of what should be in a bundle, would be very interested in helping with that as well.
So Rick, speaking personally, the top half of that list, so bundle, protocol additional blocks, that's bundle and bundle, is work in progress. Manifest block, I know that Scott and Ed are both very keen to see that work being done. As Ed said, asynchronous management is very much underway. The bottom half of this list is actually something I think is as important, but has less interest or less input from the regulars, so to speak. So neighbor discovery, outside of very fixed deterministic delay tolerant networks, some sort of neighbor discovery starts to be relevant. When you're looking at ad hoc style DTNs, which is obviously for non-space communities a main driver for DTNs, you've got to be able to discover potential forwarding opportunities, potential adjacencies. How is this done at the bundle processing layer? We know how to do this with link technologies, but how do we bridge that link to bundle protocol gap? And there's lots of room for ideas, experimentation, suggestions, and all welcome. Also naming and addressing. That's people outside of this room assume that there's a naming scheme. There is, but it's fairly simple. I'm trying not to be rude about it, but it works for small systems. If we want to try, do we want to try and build a global heterogeneous DTN network? Because if we do, we need a proper global addressing. We need to solve the global addressing problem. Let me put it that way. So that might pique some people's interest. Marc Blanchet is very keen on a registry of service identifiers. I'm really hoping he drives that work. Personally, I have a partially written HTTPS CL. I just don't have the time to finish it. I'm looking for co-authors. I'm looking for anyone to just help me get the words out. I have an SMTP implementation. It's partially broken. It would be nice to write up what I'm doing. It's not brilliant. I need help, or I'm happy to just give it to somebody else to work on this. It's about collaboration, and we need input. Anyway, that's me.
Scott Burley, I'm of course very committed to doing bundle encapsulation. I'm certainly interested in the naming and addressing. I definitely want to be part of that conversation. Neighbor discovery, there's a informational or experimental RFC that is implemented and works. I think it's a good prototype for us to be working from. In ION in particular, what I've been trying to do is support opportunistic forwarding based on contact graph routing, and in aid of that, I've got definitions for a non-standard administrative record that communicates a neighbor discovery history through the network, so that you can guess at likely contacts in the future with some degree of confidence, and base forwarding decisions on that. There are a number of other extension blocks and administrative records that we are finding that are non-standard, that we are finding useful. In particular, quality of service at some point I think needs to be addressed, and I'm certainly interested in working on all of that. I'm happy to leave the registry of service identifiers to Mark.
So go ahead, Stu, if you want. So one of the questions put to us by RAD was, given the amount of effort involved and the size of this list, what does the working group want to prioritize? We have to prioritize these things. So does anyone have any strong opinions about which are the key next pieces to do?
Stu Card here. I guess I will speak before prioritizing because I've got more things to prioritize. So the whole naming and addressing area, that's an area in which, within my severe bandwidth constraints, I would be interested in contributing. We've had some thoughts at our shop about mapping between DTN endpoint IDs and other identifier spaces. You will probably groan but not be surprised when I mention host identities.
Mm-hmm.
And those of you who are familiar with high frequency radio communications and the ALE standard, automatic link establishment, has ALE identifiers, which I think are sometimes relevant here. Another area where, again, within limited bandwidth, I would be interested in working on the norm convergence layer. When it comes to SMTP, there's some work that our shop did way back in 2001, where, because the bundle protocol didn't exist yet, we gave a different answer to the question of, is this just SMTP? In our case, the answer was yes, and we bundled all sorts of things inside of SMTP, and I think it would be great to be able to put a real bundle, now that we have a bundle protocol, inside SMTP and vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you want to transport a bundle across SMTP, sometimes you want to transport SMTP across a DTN with bundle protocol. The folks over in the network coding research group are interested in supporting DTN with network coding. They are pretty bandwidth limited as well. And finally, I think the ICN application somewhere should be on this radar, and the profit draft, the profit extension draft, I think is pretty neat. So I'm just throwing more things on the list before we start ranking them.
So quick question, you raised that about the profit extension draft that came in from the ICN. The guy who put that, he's not in the room, is he? Because there's occasionally, this is me with my chair hat on, just in case somebody's listening to the audio in the future. Occasionally we get drafts coming in from Far Eastern universities and academic institutions talking about DTN work, talking about crossovers with ICN, and it's interesting things. And there's not a lot of communication with the working group. They just submit a personal draft, and that's the last we hear. I would really like these people to come and talk to us. Just put a message on the mailing list to say, hi, I have submitted this individual draft, because there is a lot of interest with people who read these things and say, hey, that's really good. Let's move it on. Are the authors of these drafts, do they want them to become working group documents? Do they? My question, I suppose, is this a way of publishing a paper to achieve part of their degree, which is not quite what it's for, but that's okay. But the work is good, and when the work is good, let's work on it in the working group, and let's go make this a standard. So it's a bit of a plea to any of the authors of a couple of these documents to say, we like this, you know, come talk to us. It's an open forum. We can do this work. Okay.
Adam Whitaker, Critical Technologies. I want to just dovetail on that point. Maybe at some point, somebody, I'm not volunteering myself, but reach back out on some of those drafts that were really highlights that we saw. Reach back and say, hey, we've been looking back through. This was really interesting. Is there anything else going on? Because maybe they continued working on it. Just to put up into Stu's point, I generally try to relieve the stress and take load off of him for his work. So we're both constrained, and I share a lot of what he's interested in as well. But I'm also interested in just reviewing. If you have something, throw me an email. I'll review it. I'll read it. I'll try to give you some sort of feedback.
So the best place to review stuff is get on the data tracker, look at the active documents, and just literally put a review on the mailing list to say, I read this, you've got a typo here, I don't understand paragraph 4. All review helps.
I hate to go to the mic twice in a row, but Stu Card here. All right, so I guess if nobody's throwing more things on the list, I will nominate naming and addressing as a priority.
Okay, Rick, speaking personally, I agree with you, Stu. I think naming and addressing is the elephant in the room, as they say. It's the one thing we all pretend works, but when you start to look at it, it's not actually there yet. I will also add, we have some of the asynchronous management is already on the charter as an architecture. I know that Ed and his team are working hard on this and doing good work, and I think it's really important. So my +1 is for the asynchronous management. So we have 7 minutes left. I get the feeling that we've covered quite a lot of the topics. I think the new charter item, priorities, and people offering to work on it or saying what they're working on that they want to contribute into the working group, I think we'll take that to the list. So last 5 minutes, any other business, or I shall close early and we can go and see if we can find a cup of coffee and I can get another drink for my throat. Okay, in which case I'm going to close the meeting early. Thank you very much, and we'll see you all in Vancouver. Okay? Yeah. Oh, blue sheets, blue sheets, blue sheets, blue sheets. Thank you very much. So
Surf invited me to come and describe what we had done. And at this point, what we have done is ancient history. It's like an unrecorded prehistory of DTN. But I think a little bit might be of interest and possibly of use. So if you wanted those slides and
Absolutely, absolutely. Because we had quite a lot. The problem I have is people are watching and doing things. Active contributors, of course, there's Scott there who have great